Imagine being so confident in your own judgment that you walk straight into a total death trap, fully aware of the risks, yet convinced you'll prevail because, well, you're George Armstrong Custer. We're going back to the blistering summer of 1876, right into the heart of the Montana Territory. At the center of this storm was a man many called the Golden Boy. With his flowing blonde hair, custom-made buckskin uniform, and a reputation for bold Civil War victories, Custer hadn't just built a military career, he had built a brand. He felt invincible. But on this June day, that legendary ego was about to hit a wall of reality that no amount of luck could fix. You have to remember, 1876 was the centennial of the United States, the 100th anniversary. The nation was hungry for heroes, and Custer was more than happy to play the part. He wasn't just fighting a campaign on the frontier, he was auditioning for the history books, and quite possibly a seat in the White House. He understood that a massive, headline-grabbing victory would make him the most famous man in America. In his mind, military success and political ambition were the exact same thing, and that's where the trouble started. He was so obsessed with his own distinction that he became dangerously impatient. Waiting for reinforcements meant sharing the credit. Delaying meant the public might forget his name. He was in a race with his own ego. On the morning of June 25th, his scouts returned with news that should have stopped any sane commander in their tracks. These were experienced men who knew the land and the tribes better than anyone. They reported a massive encampment in the valley, not just a few families, but a vast, unified coalition. They told him the number of warriors was unlike anything they'd ever seen. The warning was clear. General, if you go down there, you aren't coming back. And honestly, this is the part that blows my mind. Custer just didn't want to hear it. He was so terrified that the camp might disperse and he'd lose his big moment that he chose to ignore the very experts he hired to guide him. This was the first fatal decision point. Reinforcements were less than 24 hours away. One day. If he had just waited, the history books would look completely different. But Custer prioritized speed over survival. He even made the baffling choice to leave his Gatling guns behind, because he thought they'd slow his movement. Imagine that. Leaving your heavy firepower behind, right before the biggest fight of your life, just because you wanted to shave a few hours off your travel time. He chose momentum over preparation, and that choice narrowed his margin for error to almost zero. As his regiment approached the Little Bighorn River, Custer made the second move that honestly leaves historians scratching their heads. With about 600 men and zero reliable intelligence on the enemy's actual strength, he decided to divide his force into 3 separate battalions. Now, you only split your forces like that if you're chasing a retreating enemy. Doing it when you're facing a superior, unified force is basically a military sin. He was fragmenting his own strength at the exact moment he needed it most. He thought he was surrounding a vulnerable camp, but in reality, he was just making sure his men couldn't support each other when the chaos started. When he finally topped the ridge and saw the valley below, the scale of his mistake must have hit him like a physical blow. The encampment was enormous. This was a unified force of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors, led by legends like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. And they weren't preparing to run. They were prepared to fight back. Once the engagement began, it wasn't a battle. It was an explosion. The warriors moved with incredible speed, encircling Custer's group before they could even understand what was happening. His command was quickly isolated on exposed terrain with nowhere to hide. It got so desperate that the soldiers were forced to shoot their own horses just to create makeshift cover. Think about the sheer panic of that moment. There was no regrouping, no secret reinforcements, and absolutely no way out. Within roughly an hour, the firing stopped. Custer and every single man in his immediate command were dead in the dirt. The Little Bighorn wasn't just a dramatic last stand. It was the result of a man who believed his own hype too much. It was a sequence of dismissing warnings, abandoning heavy weapons, and choosing pride over common sense. Custer didn't fall because he lacked courage. He fell because he believed past success guaranteed a future win. He underestimated his opponent and overestimated his own legend. And once those decisions were locked in, the outcome was already written in the dust of Montana. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's darkest strategic failures, make sure to subscribe to History's Fatal Decisions. We have more stories of empires, errors, commercial disasters, and the human cost of bad leadership coming soon.